Okay, thank you. Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining this session on transportation and infrastructure. My name is Christian Otchia. I'm an associate professor at Nagoya University, and we're lucky to have Ginger as our host. And thank you for hosting this session. She'll be recording the session and remind us of the time. And before we start the presentation, just let me remind some household rules. Please remain muted unless you're speaking or you're asking a question. And we allocate about 20 minutes for each presentation. And about 2 minutes before the presentation finish, I will remind you about the time. And we have about 10 minutes for question and answers. So we prefer using the chat during the presentation if you have questions, but of course, we'll ask you to unmute yourself if we have a chance to discuss after the presentation. So without further ado, let's start the presentation. We have 4 papers today, and our first speaker is Jared from RTI International. So Jared, would you like to share your slides? And okay, and Jared's presentation is on insight from adding transportation sector detail into an economy-wide model, the case of the ADAGE CG models. So please start when you're ready. I don't know, I cannot see your slides. Can someone see the slides?
No.
No.
Maybe you can stop sharing and start sharing again.
Jared, I'm wondering if you have frozen up. Your video, you haven't moved, so I'm wondering if you have frozen. Okay, I'm going to stop Jared's sharing and yeah, I'm not seeing him moving on his video at all. So I have a feeling perhaps his connection has frozen up or something. In the interest of time, since we don't know when he might come back to us, how about, Christian, do you want to move on and have Anna go and then we can work Jared back in?
Exactly. So
okay.
Anna, could you try your slides if it's gonna work? I think Jared is coming back.
Oh, yep. Let's see if we can hear him now.
Hi there, sorry about that.
Okay.
Something with my Zoom software went awry.
Okay, see if you can go ahead and share again. We think you froze up last time.
Okay, fingers crossed this time. Okay.
And if you still have problems, we can shuffle you to a later time slot here in the session.
Are you able to see the slides now?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay, it says I'm sharing at the moment. Let me try advancing the slide, see if this just worked 5 minutes ago.
Okay, try one more time to share your slides, and if it doesn't come up, then yeah, we'll move on to Anna, and we'll circle back around to you if it's not. Oh, there we go.
Okay, great.
Now just change your display settings. Yeah.
Okay. Good.
Perfect. Perfect.
All right. All right. Sorry for the technical difficulties. Off we go. All right. So this is focused on focus on transportation and integration into a global CGE model based on the GTAP data set. That is our applied dynamic analysis general equilibrium model, ADAGE. And we want to talk through some of the results that we saw from including increased transportation sector detail into the model under different oil price scenarios. So the research problem that we were trying to tackle in this research, I'll just say first, this research was funded in part by EPA, but these results do not reflect the any of the views of the agency. And I just want to briefly acknowledge co-authors on this paper. The model development here was led by Young-Chul Kai here at RTI International with support from Robert Beach, and in close collaboration with our colleagues at EPA, Lauren Rafalski, Chris Remick, and Michael Shelby. So thank you to the full team for all they've invested in this work. So the research problem, the definition of our research problem that we're trying to address comes down to a focus on the transportation sector as an environmentally and economically significant sector for the economy. It's a leading source of greenhouse gas emissions in the US as of 2017. Unfortunately, economy-wide models, they are frequently representing the transportation sector at a very aggregate level. We know the transportation sector is technically complex. There are lots of energy and physical infrastructure, lots of different technologies that are operating in the sector, much like the electric power sector, with rich spatial problems operating as well. It's heterogeneous, and the mode choices that end users face for personal transportation or for freight, and it varies by geography as well. So the upshot there is that we think this problem merits a disaggregated modeling approach, and what we've developed is to approach within an economy-wide framework that disaggregates road transportation modes into passenger, freight, and public transit or buses for the road modes, and then non-road modes as an aggregate. And then within each mode introduces several different propulsion technologies that could be adopted to see how those the adoption of different technologies varies over time and what kind of economic and environmental impacts that has. And the scenarios we're going to consider are focused on oil market outcomes, and so rises and drops in the oil market, the price for oil on international markets. We'll see how that impacts our environmental and economic outcomes. Okay, so again, the model here, the applied dynamic analysis of the global economy, ADAGE model. And a little overview on the model. It's built on a GTAP 7 data. It is recursive dynamic. It starts in 2010 in steps in five-year periods out to 2050. It's a CG model written in GAMS NPSGE. It has 8 regional governments that collect taxes and handle income transfers. And the regions we'll see on the next slide in just a second. The resolution, there are 8 regions. The sectors are, of course, it's a CG model, so it has economy-wide coverage with concentrated detail in energy, transportation, and agricultural sectors. We also have a strong biofuels component in this model. The model also controls for land use types, land use conversion, and emissions from land use change, and tracks several different pollutants. The labor is fixed within each country and capital as well. It's recursive dynamics, so the investment dynamics are in fixed proportion to GDP in the given period. So here's the finer detail on some of the resolution. You can see the geographic resolution on the left and the sectoral resolution on the right. You can see a lot of detail in agriculture. Of course, that's common for GTAP based models, but and particularly important for us here in addressing questions around biofuels. And we have a rich representation of biofuel blending in the model. And then, of course, transportation is broken out into auto and non-auto, and then within the or road and non-road, and then within those modes, there's several different technologies within the road modes. Okay. And then the several different technologies operating within electricity as well. Okay. So let's focus on the disaggregation that we took on for this research. There's the non-road, there's air, water, rail freight, rail passenger, and other. Those are all operating on a single technology. And then on the on-road side, light-duty freight trucks and passenger buses, as I mentioned before, and those each have several different technologies operating within them. And those technologies are a conventional technology, where or the on-road, in the on-road cases, that's internal combustion engines, hybrid technologies, natural gas vehicles, battery electric vehicles, and fuel cells. So what we're going to see is how those, based on the different cost assumptions and market conditions, how do those, what are the technology adoption trends for each of those? Okay. Now to do that disaggregation across the different technologies, we need certain assumptions on those costs, broken into capital, labor, operations, and maintenance, and energy costs being important for fuel economy. And this comes from a wide variety of sources that our research team have assembled from public sources and also in close collaboration with the GChem modeling team. All right, so what do those costs look like? These graphs here present the exogenous production costs that are calibrated into the model for each of the different transportation modes. You can see that in some of the modes, the conventional technology early on is the cheapest technology, but by the 2020s or 2030 timeframe, you start to see other technologies becoming more cost competitive. And these are just the calibrated costs, and depending on the market, the prevailing conditions within the model, under different policy conditions, these unit costs will change and drive different adoption trends. All right, and so the flip side to that are the efficiency trends that are assumed exogenously within the model. So for each of the different modes, here are the efficiency trends for each of the different technologies. You can see them also rising, and particularly in the 2020 timeframe. Now, the new vehicle production has the option to substitute some to build more efficient vehicles with the addition of more capital in the production process. But that sort of substitution is only happening for the new vehicles, and we have a rich capital vintaging structure that is going to integrate those new vehicles into the overall vehicle fleet over time as the model steps forward. So it can't all happen at once. Okay, so this here we'll describe that capital turnover process a little bit more. The vehicle stocks are assumed to live up to 35 years, and based on historical survival rates that are detailed in the EPA's MOVES model, version 2014A. They have different vehicle survival rates and VMT schedules for the vehicle lives, and that tell us how much, what's the probability of a vehicle surviving to a given period, and then what is its relative use going to be at a given age. The fuel economy, as I mentioned, is set by exogenous trend, but then there is the adjustment for the new vehicles, and then that gets averaged into the existing vehicle stock over time. And then that extant vehicle stock, once a vehicle is produced, its input proportions have become fixed. And then as retirements pass through, that vintage block is giving a weighted average of the surviving vehicles' efficiency characteristics. So what that means is for the new vehicles, one thing that you'll notice in a lot of models is that you'll see very rapid switching behavior between technologies as one becomes slightly more cost competitive. To dampen that response, we incorporate a fixed factor that captures things like consumer preferences, consumer awareness around alternative technologies. And what happens is the fixed factor level is set at a low level initially. As more vehicles are adopted, as we move from one period to the next, that the value, the endowment of that fixed factor is increased from period to period as adoption increases. The other thing to mention here are fuel economy standards. So there are fleet-wide fuel economy standards that must be met by mode, and so that is also a factor that's driving adoption. So that where the internal combustion engines, for example, are less efficient than the standard, that may drive further alternative fuel vehicle sales. All right, now onto the demand side of the vehicle stock or vehicle miles traveled. Vehicle miles traveled growth varies per capita by income. And we relied on a paper here by Dargay et al. On vehicle ownership by income and growth. And we use this to parameterize the demand function in the model so that as country incomes are rising and falling, depending on their initial level of income, they're having different marginal responses in their VMT demand, which tends to taper off as you get to wealthier countries. Okay, and here are some of the results from that. I think in the interest of time, we'll keep moving, but happy to take any questions on this in the Q&A session. All right, so this last note I'd like to make on the technology is for the electricity sector. As I mentioned at the outset, we have several different technologies. We have a few different fossil fuel generation technologies. Excuse me. Conventional coal and gas, combined cycle natural gas and oil, we have wind and solar, hydro, and geothermal. And these are operating with fixed factors as well and competing to provide the level of electricity demand from the rest of the economy. Those generation costs are parameterized to NREL's annual technology baseline, the National Renewable Energy Lab from the Department of Energy. And we're calibrating some of our assumptions to the AEO annual energy outlook from the Energy Information Administration as well. Okay, so that's the model description. I want to make a brief note on how we're going to go about our scenario analysis, and then we'll dive into results. So we're going to look at different oil price scenarios, as I mentioned at the outset, and we're taking these from the AEO. We're going to focus on the high oil price scenario, which means roughly a doubling of the reference oil price from AEO. We also looked at a low oil price scenario, which is roughly halving the oil price, the reference price from AEO. And then what we'll look at is the impacts on the transportation sector and then economy-wide on emissions. Ginger, how are we on time?
2 minutes.
Okay, this will be quick set of results then. Thank you. All right, so light duty, what we're going to focus on in this panel are the different transportation sectors that we've disaggregated and a comparison between when we have alternative fuel vehicles, that's the first column in each year, versus when we don't have alternative fuel vehicles in the model, that's the second column. And this is just for the reference case right now. So what you can see in this top row is the electric vehicle adoption. That's the battery and the I'm not sure how you would call that color. It's reddish. You can see it rising by 2050, a strong penetration of those electric vehicles. And that's in the reference case, whereas without, you would have, you don't have the penetration of electric vehicles. You don't have the turnover to more fuel efficient and lower emitting vehicles. And so in that reference case, we have certainly higher emissions. And we'll see the energy use as well. The pattern is similar across modes, and these are of course sensitive to the cost assumptions. But again, those electric vehicle costs from the projections that we use are coming below the internal combustion engine costs pretty quickly in the next decade or so. All right, so here is are the fuel economy trends. You can see if you compare the gray and the black lines, those are the average fleet-wide fuel economy. When you include the alternative fuel vehicles, the fuel economy is going up quite rapidly. That's the black line relative to what it would do if you didn't have those alternative fuel vehicles in the model. So on this slide, we'll look at energy consumption. Again, this is still in the reference case. What we're seeing is if we look to the out year in 2050, I think it's helpful to look at the right-hand column because that's showing you the change with relative to not having alternative fuel vehicles. You see much lower overall energy consumption in the top row, and primarily in light duty and freight. And you also see higher overall electricity generation to make up for that electrification going on, and that's in the middle panel there. On net, in the bottom panel, emissions are down. So you have this offset from more electricity generation, lower oil combustion in the transportation sector. The net effect due to efficiency of electric power and the electric vehicles themselves is for reduced emissions, and that's in this bottom right bar. You can see the net impact there in the black dot. Okay, so these scenarios are looking at the high oil price relative to the reference case, and you can see and as we're short on time here, I'm going to say cut to the chase on some of the takeaways that when you have higher oil prices, what you see in the reference cases, you see a transition role for hybrid vehicles and moving between internal combustion and electric vehicles. When the oil price is higher, that transition role is shrinking. That is, you're going to electric vehicles much more quickly, and there's less transition. When the oil price is low, the opposite is happening. There's a much more prolonged intermediate period where you're relying on hybrid electric vehicles. This is change in output, change in energy consumption with the high oil price case. And so the energy consumption is reduced by not as much when you have alternative fuel vehicles. You're taking less of an output hit for your transportation services in 2050 because you're able to avoid the higher costs of oil better. Okay. There are some GDP impacts, but I think we're at time, so we'll go straight to discussion and conclusions. the main things that we found in incorporating this additional technological detail and breaking out the different transportation modes is that we're having the availability of AFVs, alternative fuel vehicles in the model, is reducing emissions and total energy consumption, although there's a substantial shift in energy consumption from primary to secondary. And then we see this strong sensitivity to the rate of EV adoption to oil prices. That is their most natural substitute in the internal combustion and hybrid vehicles, which play this transitionary role that I just discussed. And there is also some interaction of oil prices, regional energy efficiencies, and global trade as well, in terms of the regions that are relatively more or less energy efficient in your reference case. But I didn't have time to address those results in detail, so I'll go ahead and stop here. Thank you all very much, and look forward to questions.
Thank you, Jared. Very interesting presentation. If you have questions, you can either just raise your hand or use the chat if possible. Maybe I'll go first. I'm very much interested in how you model the adoption of technology, especially the battery technology. And for example, if you look at Japan or China, the battery technology has been highly subsidized by the government. So there is a lot of subsidies in there. Even for the adoption of vehicles by consumer also, it's highly subsidized. So my question is, how do you model the adoption if we know that, of course, the cost is very important, but there is a huge subsidies from other countries? Does it affect the adoption of the technology?
Yeah, we've done separately. We've done some other modeling where we include subsidies for vehicle purchases, for example. In this modeling, what we've done instead is to any of those sort of tax and subsidy implications for the alternative fuel vehicles would be baked into the exogenous cost that we specify for each of the individual technologies. And so because of that, we would be missing any sort of like tax interaction effects or otherwise that would be arising from the subsidies. I'd have to check on the details of the cost assumptions to see exactly what subsidies are not included in there.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Mari, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry, I thought it didn't work. Hi, thank you very much for the very interesting presentation. I work at the Joint Research Center with Anna, who's our next presenter, just to give you a little bit of context. I had two questions actually. One about the results, because I didn't quite see from the slide at the end. I think I saw that in the high oil price scenario, the vehicle miles traveled for the freight were going up compared to the reference in 2050, and down for light duty vehicles. I was wondering if you could explain that. Maybe I saw a bit too quickly, so I'm not sure. But I wondered if you could elaborate a little bit on those results. And my second question is completely different. I was wondering if you're also, so you have quite a nice disaggregated approach to the demand side, and I was wondering if you looked at the implications of this transition also from the production side, because obviously those vehicles are not all manufactured simply even in the same way. So we did do some work that was not at all as sophisticated in terms of endogenous substitution, etc. on the demand side, but where we looked actually at disaggregating the production side between battery electric vehicles and internal combustion engine and the sort of employment and types of jobs impact of this, and in SCG also. And so I wonder, I think with your framework on the demand side, that would actually be very interesting to see the employment implications of these different pathways.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Marie. Those are great questions. On the first, yes, that is your eyes are not deceiving you. That's exactly what's happening on the freight. It's a counterintuitive result, and that's one of the things I was mentioning at the end that we didn't quite go into. So definitely appreciate that. You're noticing that what's happening there is that there are some terms of trade effects where with the high oil prices, the U.S. Is relatively more energy efficient, and so it has a competitive advantage under high oil prices relative to other countries, and it is providing more freight services to export because its exports are going up, and so where other countries are, taking a larger hit for those higher energy prices. On the production question, no, that hasn't been as much our focus. We've focused more on the operating characteristics of the vehicles, and not as much on the vehicle stock production itself. But I'd definitely be interested to see some of the work that you were referencing. So if we could follow up in some ways, I could get a better understanding of what you've been working on. I appreciate that.
Great, thanks. Of course, I'll send I think it should be published very soon, so it will be even an official link. Hopefully, I can send you.
Oh, that's great news, and congrats.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jared. I think if there is probably one more question, we can take it. All right. I think we just right on time. So thank you very much, Jared, for the very interesting presentation. Let's move to Anna's presentation. She's going to talk about disaggregating air, land, and maritime transport sector in the GTAP database. Okay, Anna, you have the floor.
Thank you. Okay, hopefully you can see my slides. Hello?
Yes.
Okay, so I'll start now. Okay, so, okay.
Oh, Anna, real quick, it looks like there's a like a participant box or something over top of your slides, maybe some sort of Zoom pop out. I'm not sure if others are seeing it, but it's in the left-hand side of your screen from what I'm seeing.
Oh, left-hand side. I can't see anything. I can.
And then if you change your display settings, I wonder if that might help too, because we're seeing your like all of your presentation stuff in PowerPoint.
Great. Why does they have to work now? I don't know if it's working better now. Is it still the same?
It is. Let me see. I can request remote control of your screen. Let me see if I can get it to work for you.
Okay.
So it'll probably send you a.
Yeah. So you're controlling.
Okay, that's going back. Do you see my mouse?
Yes.
right here is where there's a big box over your screen.
Okay. How about now?
Okay.
Yes, there you go. All right, I'm going to give up that remote control, so I don't know if it'll prompt you again, but.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I? All right. I'll start again. So, well, my name is Ana Norman-Lopez, and this work has been done at the Joint Research Center at the European Commission, together with colleagues Christophe, Raphael, and Marie, who you've already heard. And our work has been on the disaggregating the air, land, and maritime transport sectors in the GTAP database. So specifically, we wanted to split the GTAP transport sectors to account for each of the three transport sectors for operations, so freight and passenger. And then also, in particular, for the land sector, we wanted to be more specific and get more information for rail and road. A particular motivation for this is to be able to incorporate into our JRC GEMI3 model more detailed bottom-up information. And this model has got is being created in order to answer climate, environmental, and energy policy questions, which means that this model has got a very detailed relationship between the economy, energy sectors, and the environment. The model is also calibrated to the GTAP database available, which means that in order to proceed with our split, it was particularly necessary that we follow the GTAP structure, as well as the transport statistics available in order to aim to make our results as realistic as possible. And for the presentation today, we want to bring our experience to everybody and also collect your thoughts in terms of how we've gone on to splitting the data. So unfortunately, the work, the split is not finished. So today I'll be presenting our methodology rather than results. So to begin, we've got, we start from the three GTAP transport sectors, the air, water, and land. And our aim is to split air and water into these two subsectors, passenger and freight. And then the land sector, we want to have four subsectors. So we would like to have road passenger, road freight, rail passenger, and rail freight. We start with 34 sectors and 49 countries and regions, but obviously the aggregation can vary. So to start, because we believe it's very important to understand the GTAP structure, I would like to draw like some sort of quick summary of what's in GTAP on the representation of the international transport. So already the GTAP database differentiates between passenger and freight. In fact, the representation of international exports of passengers is represented within the non-margin sectors. This is a parameter known as BXMD. So for the three transport sectors. It's passenger, and also the statistics have got this other small other category, which represents cleaning, air traffic control, cargo handling that's not been included in freight, etc. The data and the way it's represented in the GTAP is very clean, because it comes directly from statistics, trade service statistics that come from the UN, and also for EU from Eurostat statistics. So because the representation here is based on international service trade data, it means that the representation of passengers is not on an origin destination passenger information, but is actually on the transport service transaction. On the other hand, we would like to highlight that GTAP has got more information on freight, and freight is included within the international transport margins. In particular, there's two categories. There's the usage, which is the VTWR parameter, and there is a supply, which is a VST parameter. The usage is produced using information which is merchandise trade statistics, which means that it's possible to understand what's the origin destination of a good that's being transported with a particular transport sector. And then on the supply VST, there's information on the transport service export. So the carrier of this of the good information. Because overall GTAP needs to balance the data, the usage and the supply. And there's differences between the merchandise trade data and the trade service statistics. It means that there needs to be an adjustment in the database in GTAP to make these two data sets balance. And the decision has been that the merchandise trade data is more reliable. So therefore, in terms of the VST data, it is adjusted to be closer to the VTWR. And this is why if there is a comparison with international trade statistics, so this is the balance of payments of BPM6 data, there's going to be a difference between the GTAP database and what we actually observe in statistics. There's already quite a bit of research talking about the quality of the data and stressing the data gaps that exist in transport statistics and the difficulty for transport analysis. In particular, we would like to highlight the work from Nuno Ledesma and Villoria in 2019. Who have actually improved the GTAP database 9 by including extra information for Latin America and Eurostat data, so that the international transport margin shares by transport modes were more relevant to actual statistics. And in here, in this next slide, I want to highlight again the difference in what we can find in the GTAP structure, the data we find there, and also the statistics that we can obtain. So these graphs have been obtained from Eurostat statistics. It's a comparison with Eurostat balance of payments data and GTAP data sets. So if I start from the graph on the right hand side, this is a comparison between the exports of passengers according to GTAP database. This is a parameter VXMD versus the balance of payment statistics, which incorporates passenger and other. And you can see here there's a good correlation between the two data sets. But on the other hand, if you look at the left-hand side, we want to highlight the differences for freight, which is the parameter VST in GTAP, relative to the same statistics, trade statistics from Eurostat. And the reason we think for these differences, in particular with freight, has to do because of the balancing that is done in the GTAP database between merchandise and international service trade statistics. This is relevant for our split because where we want to follow the GTAP structure and at the same time we want to follow available statistics, we need to know where the differences are, and this is obviously has got implications for how we're going to handle our split, which I'll highlight later on. Our split methodology, we've thought of a simple split where we first start splitting total output of the 3 transport sectors. We use total output statistics in order to obtain the shares, and then the shares for the different subsectors, we split the total output of the VOM parameter in GTAP. And then on step 2, once we have the value, the total output of the subsectors, we move into a simple RAS method, which we do twice to disaggregate the costs of the use side as well as the supply side in the GTAP database. So the statistics that we have used to split our value of output, it have been summarized in the table. So for EU, the data was fairly straightforward. We obtained it from Eurostat statistics. They have information for the subsectors of interest, including rail passenger, rail freight, road passenger, and road freight, using Eurostat structural business statistics. But then when we try to find data for countries outside of the EU, we actually found that things weren't so simple. So we then decided to use our global energy model, which is called POLES, and which has got information on the activity for the subsectors of interest. So for freight, it gives us information on ton kilometer, and for passenger, it gives us information on passenger kilometer. And then for Exio base, we use to help us split the land sector into rail and road. So moving on to how we did the RAS. So we tried to keep it as simple as possible. And I'm going to show as an example what we did for the air sector. The approach is similar for the maritime sector, and then the land sector is actually a bit more complicated because we also have got the extra subsectors because of rail and road. So anyway, for the case of aviation, we have to start first with the row and column totals with the VOM for RAS, which we split originally onto subsectors. And then we set the weights, which in this particular example has been set to 1, and to obtain the split. And then we move on to the second stage of the RAS, where we split the use. And again, we start with the split of the row and column totals for the value of output, which give us the value of the subsectors. And then moving next to considering the transport margins, which the GTAP structure tell us that it can only be freight. So we must account for that. We rebalance the columns, and then we set the weights. And then knowing the GTAP structure again, where the exports in the non-margin sectors have to be passenger and not freight, we then assemble the weights to account for that, and then we run the RAS. Okay, so, and then here I want to just summarize in sort of preliminary results of what's our situation in the split. So you can see the yellow line in the graph, which is what we would obtain from using transport statistics to give us sort of the shares of passengers to freight. So for example, if you think of the country Japan, which is about 60% is about passengers, and then around 40% is freight. That's the sort of information that we get from the shares. And then if we move at that regarding the GTAP requirements, which is summarized in the bars, you have in the blue bars would be the what should be only passengers. The red bars is what should be only covered by freight, and then the black bars, which is sort of in between. It allows for either passenger or freight. And what we would like from our split is that the yellow line basically cuts through the black bars, but this doesn't happen for all the cases. And this is highlighted in the red box, where our transport statistics shares tell us that passenger shares should be higher than what's recorded in GTAP statistics. And then the black box highlights the results from transport statistics, where freight shares should be higher than GTAP. So we want to follow GTAP structure. We're not going to deviate from that, but it means that we then need to consider that we need to make changes to what the transport statistics are telling us. And this is where we are, the point where we are at the moment, because as a conclusion, like we found that the split between transport statistics and what the GTAP structure was telling us wasn't just as simple as just putting the split on top using the statistics. But from my experience looking at the GTAP structure, it's quite nice to see that there is already back information from GTAP on separating passenger and freight. And obviously also to highlight the difficulties that we're finding in terms of transport statistics because of the data not being available, particularly for countries outside of the EU. And then to finalize, I would like to summarize our motivation. So today I wanted to provide some sort of like open discussion in how we're going on to doing our split and our experience. And what we want to do with this research is to provide more detailed bottom-up information into our JRC GEMI3 model. And with this, we'll be able to hopefully provide a closer representation and to work closer with other transport models in our group. So our next steps will be to finalize the split of the data. We need to do a data quality check, and then we'll move on to the baseline projection. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Anna, for the very interesting presentation. Can I invite questions from the audience? Maybe just a trivial question for myself. I work a lot on African countries, and I know how, the problem of data is very crucial. I've seen many, researchers basically using econometrics also to estimate, when you have missing data. I wonder if you have been thinking about other opportunity of estimating data by yourself using, gravity models or any other econometrics tools.
So because we've been trying to be as not make deviations and be sort of representing countries with data that can be sort of cross compared. This is why our decision was to follow on with using our information from the global energy model, which gives us a good information for the different subsectors that like that we are considering in order to then consider the passenger and freight. So no, at this stage, we're not considering doing a gravity model. I mean, it's something that we could do, obviously, but at this stage, because we've been able to start the split. I guess the next thing will be for us to sort of compare why the reasons with countries for the deviation with the GTAP, if it's just purely because of the balancing in GTAP or our activity values, and then, as you say, then we would consider other approaches.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, then I think probably there is no question. So probably if it's okay, you need to add something, or are you okay? We can move to the next presentation.
We can move on, Leon.
Actually, all of the remaining presentation will be from the European Commission. So hopefully you can come back to, to ask question or anything. So thank you very much, Anna, for this very interesting presentation. I'll call Amar for the next presentation, and he'll be talking about the economy-wide impact of extension of maritime infrastructure in Senegal.
Hello, everyone. My name is Amarendra. I have to make it screen. Is it okay now?
Yes.
I don't see anyone though. Anyways, that's fine. So, my name is Amarendra, and myself, Victor and Emanuele from JRC, and we collaborated with DDR from West African Development Bank. And this ongoing research is about the impacts of maritime infrastructure expansion, that is improved efficiency, port efficiency, impact of improved port efficiency in Senegal. So basically, as you know, the Senegal is quite enjoys the strategical location for the port, Senegal port, strategical location for the trans-Saharan trade. And impact of, in fact, is the first major port of call from Europe, which has the import, almost 77% of the export goes to the outside of Africa. That's what the African Development says in 2021. And Dakar is the most important port, as all of us know. That's a quite important port, which has and contributes almost 90% of Senegal's trade. And according to the Port Authority of Dakar, like around 75% and 20% of export and imports been reported increase of 75%, 20% reported volume of export import during 2016 and 2020. And as you say, and most of the investment comes from the private. The infrastructure has been made by the private sectors, and almost contributing to 5.6 points of GDP. Even then, still there is a lot of constraint on the capacity and a lot of pressure on the capacity as the demand has gone up and demand for the port has gone up. Given the infrastructural constraint, there's a lot of inefficiencies in terms of the price, in terms of the cost, which are adding to the cost. We call it iceberg cost, type of cost. And some of the efficiency or inefficiency indexes I picked from different sources. It said that index of seaport services is 50%, while the world's top one is 91%. And the border clearance index was 29% compared to the neighboring Cote d'Ivoire which is 44%. And the cost of importing to Senegal per container is still 1.6 times higher than compared to OECD countries, importing to OECD countries. At the same time, the shipping, general cargo handling charge has been $15 per ton, which is very higher than the neighboring ports in West Africa. So basically, you see there will be deadweight losses in maritime export and import due to the existing different types of transaction and distributional cost linked to the infrastructural constraints, and we got higher demand for the port. And the country is trying to tackle these challenges, investing more on one port and expanding the Dakar port, which is the most important port, and the new Dakar port, also proposing the new Dakar port, new port on Diana, and which is the huge investment has been made. I think it's $1 billion in 2 phases till 2035. And according to some of this report, that 250 billion CFA francs in 2022 has been proposed, the investment is proposed, which would facilitate the additional trade equivalent to 3% of GDP per year, starting from 2022 on. That's one of the reports British International Investment says. And this paper, in our research, we try to evaluate this potential outcome of improved efficiency of export and imports, due to the expansion of the which is proposed expansion of the port infrastructure. And we're using a recursive dynamic single country CG model called DEMETRA. And DEMETRA stands for Dynamic Equilibrium Model for Economic Development, Research and Agriculture. It's quite a long name. And in a short, and it's a standard CG model with a dynamic CG model, and it has 14 regions. We have 14 regions in Senegal, which is with the marginal farmers. The 14 regions have activities, that have marginal activities. They call it home production and consumption, and they separate it from the marketable production activities. So basically, you have 61 marketed and 9 subsistence commodities. And we have several representative households, the rural and urban by regions, and income groups in Dakar. But 4 types of transport margins: domestic transport margins, and for 3 types of transport margin for goods to exports. And about this, the production structure is the standard C is nested production function, and with presence of household home production and the consumption types that separates the marketable and subsistence production activities. And the regional based factor market segmentation, and household can also move between different regions. There. And we have the exports and import efficiency in our CET export and CS import functions. It's a recursive dynamic CG model. A quick look at the structure of the economy. Particularly the model is calibrated to the benchmark, the SAM of 2014, and we updated it 2021. And the SAM was done by Alfred et al. In Jersey. You can see this, most of the activities, mining and agro-processing are the most important. Mining, agro-processing, and chemicals are the most important activities. And almost, you see, the export and highly tradable sectors. Mining is 14% of the total export is mining, and 13.6% of the import. And similarly, the food processing is 27% of the total export and 13% in total imports. So these are the very highly tradable sectors. Besides, there is a chemical as well. So the chemicals, 67, almost 68% of export to the output, export to the output is constitute 68%, while the imports 83% of the 83% of the domestic total demand comes from the import for the chemicals. And also the food crops. Most of the food crops, also was 46% of the rice, 46% of the 46% and 52% of the rice and other crops come from the imports. That's a demand, total demand in the domestic total demand. In total demand, 46% and 52% of the rice imports, rice and other crops imports. So basically, this drives the most of the results. We can see this for the most highest share and most competitive sectors drive the results. The scenarios, and in our scenario, as I said, that we focus on the efficiency, increase in import efficiency, export and import efficiency. There are studies like based in GTAP, most of the GTAP studies with global CG model. They've used iceberg cost type of non-tariff NTMs they used, and they have used for the import augmenting technical change by reducing the import augmenting technical change. They take care of the iceberg cost reduction. And there are studies by the willingness to pay, where they have really tampered with the distributional parameters related to the average share parameters. And there's a port efficiency in the spatial model, spatial general equilibrium model and transport network system in the Brazil. And for the OECD countries, there's another studies by the I think apparently OECD. Yes, I think OECD countries. I've not mentioned it here probably. Oh, yeah, there was another OECD countries country they have done it. Also, the similar studies where they moved the improved efficiencies by reducing trade cost through prices and for the exports and imports. So basically, they play with the imports and export prices. So in our study, we have the existing iceberg types of non-tariff cost. We consider as the cost can be reduced by increasing the efficiency in imports and exports, both imports and exports. For this, this Simola et al, and they've computed some NTMs for African countries based on their updated GTAP data. And this NTM cost, we found that the average NTM cost comes around to, for the imports and export for Senegal, comes around to 4% and 5% respectively. Here, this is the average of for the whole country, not by sector wise, and we are going to use this 4% for our scenario analysis for 4%. For baseline scenario, as I said, that it is a model, it is SAM is for 2014 and we updated it to 2021. And this, the model is then projected to the year 2025 to create the baseline growth path. And export efficiency, and we simulate the export efficiency, we simulate the efficiency parameter of CET functions by 4% between 2022 and 2025. And similarly for the CES Amarendra function, in the CES Amarendra function, the efficiency parameter has been simulated by 4% between 2020 and 2025, and that is aggregated. Then we combined effect. We just see the combined for the both combined effect of both increase in import and export efficiencies. So a quick look at the macro implication. We see that GDP, this left side is the percentage growth, cumulative average of the percentage growth from 2021 to 2025. Where we have the GDP growth is GDP is growing by 22.2% and export has grown by 5.6%. So this side and the right side, you see the change from the baseline, base 2025. When the shocks are given on 2025, this is the change from the base of 2025. So here, also the 4% increase in GDP and the quite big contribution from the export. This is 11% export grows by 11, increases by 11%. And it should be noted that when the production also goes by 6%, but most of the productions also with the help of intermediate demand for intermediate inputs, of like 11% increase in demand for intermediate inputs. So basically, we see that even in the case of import, there will be a lot of imports of there's dependent. The whole imports is coming for also contribute to the increase in intermediate imports. So that helps also the production sectors and production also increases. Production drives the most exports. Exports are increasing. Here we see that in our even the import, the orange bar is for the import efficiency, increasing import efficiencies. Increasing import efficiency also increases the export quite substantially. That's because it helps in production, and production become the cost of production becomes it reduces the cost of production from production, and because the more availability of intermediate inputs and more availability of intermediate input that helps the production. Rise in the production as well, and that helps also export sectors. And sectorally, export import, we see that I don't know, is it reduced completely? I don't see the below. So as you see that for most of these here's a total effect. You can see the cash crops, most of these resources are allotted to the most efficient and competitive sectors. When the efficiency increases, the export sector increases, export efficiency increasing, export efficiency prompts more export for mining, chemicals, and also the cash crops, while the rice export of rice decline, and also the livestock and forest the sector declines. So basically, the most efficient sector, competitive sectors, the resources are allocated to the most competitive sectors and more profitable sectors, which has more share in the economy. And similar imports of more imports of agriculture with the imports also increases. Like countries become more dependent, also dependent on import of crops. Some of the crops, most of the crops are cash crops, mostly the cash crops. By 11% of the cash crop increases, and also you can see the chemicals, import of chemicals and processed food sectors also increases because they are the most important contributors. They contribute to the intermediate input. Quickly on the export-import prices, and as expected, that's efficiency increase in efficiency of import. It reduces the prices, import prices, because of the removal of the constants. Now the prices of the importers get a better, because less expensive for the importers, and similarly for the exporters, for the demand side, demand for the export also increases, and the export constant, all the costs for the exports reduced substantially because of the increase in efficiencies. At the domestic production side, we have the clear indication the domestic production increases for the chemicals, petroleums, and processed food and mining sectors. These are the sectors which are more competitive and profitable sectors probably, and they gain due to the increase in trade efficiency. Nevertheless, other sectors like crop productions also increases, and we could see that most of the crop productions and as well as petroleum and chemicals are benefiting from the import efficiencies, increase in the import efficiencies. That's again, that's again, I should say that how much they gain from the cost of efficiency, gain from the productivity gain because of the import, better import and more import availability of import of intermediate commodities, and the demand, the increase in demand because of the price, they have reduced price effect.
2 minutes.
Yeah. And this is the domestic prices, domestic demand and prices. We see this side it as the domestic demand and this side the prices as expected. Some of the prices declines most of the cases except the cash crops, and the fish, except cash crop and fish and the livestock. And domestic, because of the declining domestic prices, domestic demand has gone up for all sectors. However, it has been more for the petroleum, as we have already seen. That's for the petroleum and chemicals, and then the processed food sectors, they gain the mostly, and the cash crops. The demand goes up for those sectors. Household consumptions increase. General household consumption is expected to increase for all households, and we have just aggregated the household. I have aggregated it. The urban, we said that in the urban sectors, you see the food and non-food. But the food consumption increases as increase gains more, benefits more than the non-food. Both of them benefits, but is relatively more. And urban sectors gains the most because urban sectors, they gain urban Senegals, and not only total Senegal urban, as well as the Dakar sector, particularly the households in Dakar, urban households in Dakar, they gains the most. So and welfare is similarly, the income and welfare, they follows a similar pattern. You can see this in short, this urban households, they benefit from this increase in efficiencies, the port efficiency, and particularly the Dakar households in Dakar and urban household in Dakar benefit, the larger benefit accrued to them. In conclusion, the expansion in general, the expansion of maritime infrastructure in leading to the increase in efficiency will have overall positive impact on the economic activities, where we said that 2% cumulative average GDP growth and 4% in 2025, and export will grow at 6% and 11% 2025, while the intermediate demands will play important role, intermediate inputs for the domestic activities, mostly for the cash crops, mines, and petroleum products. And there will be more imported food crops, availability of more imported food crops. There will be more availability of imported food crops for the domestic consumption. Mining, as we have already discussed, I have already told many times that mining, processing industries benefit the most from the higher export efficiencies. This is seen across all the slides. So, in terms of consumption and household benefit, households benefit more from the income and the lower domestic prices, and there will be an increase in food consumption is higher than the non-food consumption. Generally welfare increases. In general, welfare increases, but welfare increases more for urban households and particularly for the urban house population in Dakar. This work is still going on. It's a very general. I mean, basically the caveat, there are many caveats, but one of the most caveats is that NTMs that we are using it, because we are using the average NTMs based on the study, Simula and things, because we are not able to take the sectoral level because of there are a lot of the information are not really acceptable for many sectors, particularly for Senegal. And we need better qualification of NTM reduction at sectoral level. For example, to increased capacity and more streamlined processing of trade for different commodities. So we need to have more detailed study on that, so that give you a better result and better outcome of this study. And particularly for the investment and expansion of the port to Dakar, we'd also like we would like to look into the case where there have a recent investment, where there has been government expansion of the port of Dakar at more detailed level, so that we can understand the wider effects of this trade and economy of Senegal. Thank you very much. Hello.
Thank you very much, Amar.
Thanks. I don't know. I can't see anyone. No.
Okay. So
How to do it? Yes. So.
Okay. May I invite questions from the audience? Meanwhile, maybe I can start. Two questions, but I think one, you basically responded to that in your conclusion, because I noticed that the impact on investment was very, very low in one of your results, your main results. So I was wondering, because we could assume that this increase in efficiency is coming probably because of higher investments, but in the findings, I didn't see the number of which slide number, but the impact on investment was very low. So I just wanted to know why you got these results. And the second question was more about this dynamic, the regional, the spatial dimensions. Of course, you presented the findings on Dakar, urban, and also other urban, but I just wanted to know because one of the nicest feature of your model is also this movement, the regional disaggregation, but also you modeling migration. So I just wanted to know if there is any mechanism through migration that could also help us understand your results better.
Thank you very much. As I got your, for the first question, the investment, these slides apparently you're saying that this are macro aggregates.
Yes.
So the investment grows by 2% because it's a 2%, and where the GDP is. In fact, the first thing is that we have not directly tempered the investment as such. We didn't get these proper things. If we have done it, we're not really shocking via the investment here. We are just simulating the efficiency, increasing, assuming the investment, if investment takes place. Yes. So these are the results, outcome of if the efficiency increases, what would be the investment? Of course, investment would increase as a because of the more demand will come because income effect, and also the other things, the investment activities, domestic activities will come. There'll be increased domestic activities of production, and that requires investment. So these are the investment demand. So this is the GDP in the contributing to the GDP, 2% of the investment, which grows by 2%. That's not bad. But as you said, we have not, as I said, we have not really simulated or we have not given shock directly from this investment. So that is our next step. Probably we will do that one. And so in that case, we will see that investment might increase. That will increase, private investment will increase. So that we have to take care of it in our next work. I mean, following after this, probably, if you get proper data. And about your regional dimensions, yes, you are right, because we have all the regions, 14 regions, the households of 14 regions households, and there is a scope of migration. And I have just here it may not be so much clearly visible. I mean, if I would present it, apparently I just aggregated it for the sake of giving this results preliminary. I mean, not preliminary. Yes, it's a kind of preliminary, just to give it as it is. So yes, probably I could give it the most detailed disaggregated household. That would give you a household disaggregation that could be better, and taking care of the migration. Yes, you are right. And that's when it might activate more migration to Dakar and urban areas. If you put Dakar benefits more Dakar people. Yes, that's not been taken care of here, probably. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other question? Yeah, Mari, please go ahead.
Hi, me again. I wanted to follow up actually on the previous question, because that's also a result that I found really interesting. Is something that we also try to work on is, and now develop in our model, is the distributional impact with different types of households. So in your model, you have the different households in terms of rural and urban and capital or not. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on what mechanism in your analysis is leading to this result that the urban households are gaining the most from the shock, and why the urban households in Dakar.
Well, in urban household and Dakar, they gain mostly for the income side. That because of their contribution to the the mechanism is through the factor contribution to the factor production. So basically, in generally, it should be like that. It should be both more they contribute this endowment. There's each of the households they contribute to the endowment of the production factor productions. So Dakar gains apparent mostly because of the income effect, and they have the capital and the gain from the capital and contribution their capital, and also the labor, skilled labor and the production activities, more production activities, for example, chemicals, or as you see that I mean, I have to dig into deep. Thank you very much for this question. I'll dig more into it about this one and the paper. Results in the paper. So basically, as I understand, that will be because of the activities. We have the more activities which are like more profitable activities like chemicals and chemical, petroleum, and cash crops, and processed food crops. And these are the urban, mostly where the more activity goes on. It's not in the rural or other region part. For example, the rice is for the Maritime region or some other regions. So they are not benefiting that much as compared to the Dakar or nearby neighborhood of Dakar. It's the biggest region. So, and also it is apparently they gain more because of their capital gain or contribution of skilled. These sectors probably need more skilled labor than non-skilled. Those activities that we are now getting it. So that's the reason I would dig into it for sure. And my hunch is it does. I remember very well that it's because of the price effect, like that the income, the factor income they gain from the participation is mostly from this skilled labor and some capital, non-agriculture capital for this particularly. So that's why their income increases and they benefit more, and the consumption also increases that way, and prices has less. And compared to the other regions, and I should really keep that out the regions. We have 14 regions. I should have given that. I just aggregated because we put complete clumsy to put in a slide. So I just put it aggregated once. Yes, I'm sure I'll do that. And that's the mechanism. It goes for distributional things. How much you contribute to the endowment. Like what is your endowment as a household? I give as a labor, as a capital, or agriculture, and the livestock, how much I have, and what is the gain in the activities. If there's some activities increases, like rice activity increases, then I could be unskilled labor will gain more than the skilled labor, because the rice sectors, more unskilled labor will be employed. So here, probably on our results, it's mostly the non-agriculture, non-food sectors. In the sense, cash crops and other things are gaining more than the food sectors. Production-wise, production activities gone, and that benefits the urban sectors, particularly the Dakar. I mean, I took Dakar I took Dakar as it because it's port, possibly. I mean, but it's probably it's not really. I should have given more detailed household welfare and consumption income side also.
That's very interesting. Maybe we can follow up also in-house, since we're both sure.
So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mari, for the question. Just maybe to add something, probably you could also think about mapping those results, especially for the regional ones. That would also be very interesting to see as visuals.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, Amar.
Thank you very much, Christian.
Yeah. Let's move to the last presentation by Emanuele. So, Emanuele, would you like to share your slides? And the presentation is about modeling the impact of a surge in shipping costs. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Please go ahead, Emanuele, if you're ready.
Can you see my slide? Yeah.
Yes. Perfect.
All right. Okay, good. Thank you. So thank you very much, Christian. So yeah, indeed, my presentation, which is a joint work with another colleague yet of the the Joint Research Center, Panos Christidis, will support me in this job. So the idea was to look a bit into the recent surge of the trade. International transportation costs that we witnessed mainly during 2021, but it's somehow still ongoing. So it looks like, well, maybe for those who, given that most of us are GRC, looking at policy issues, it looks like we are, jumping from one emergency to the other. So 1 year ago, we were all looking at the effects on the supply chain of the COVID-19, and now we are all probably looking at the effects on the supply chain and the food security of the Ukrainian war. But you might also remember we had a smaller, in a way, but still was considered at a certain point an emergency in the middle, when we had this big jump of the international cost. At a certain point, someone was also threatening us we won't be able to receive our Christmas presents from Amazon during last Christmas, and yeah, mostly was due to the recovery, of the economy after the collapse due to the COVID-19 crisis, and the strong recovery at among the causes, among the effects that created also this huge rise of international cost. I just put in the slide one of these index that shows that this Freightos Baltic index, that the freight rates reach around $10,000, which was an increase of around 400%. Compared to the previous year, a sort of plateau around $9,000 during 2022. So what we would like to do with this paper, so our contribution is basically, somehow combined. So we would like to evaluate, using a global general equilibrium model, the impact of this increase on the international cost on the global economy. Of course, we have a particular look also at the EU, but in general, we would like to check whether, in the literature, it's the idea is that there will be an increase in cost due to this surge, whether this will actually, how this will manifest, and also within this the further disruption which was due to the Ukraine which is due to the Ukraine war, whether this might have also an additional impact. And how we do this, but basically we will use a GTAP based model. Well, I think we had a clear demonstration today in this session, that a lot of GTAP and GTAP based models being used to model transport cost issues because of many advantages that are linked to the use of the GTAP and model based on this database. And what we would do, so we will use this magnet model that I will detail a little bit more down the line, and we will add basically 3 additional database to our model, which is a detailed international transport course, which is published by UNCTAD, a distance matrix database, and we will use this index for transportation costs to calculate our shocks. We will then, use these shocks into our model, and we will provide the evaluation of this increasing cost on the global economy. So the first database we're using, as I said, is this UNCTAD Global Transport Cost Database for International Trade. This data set is based on our 6 input-output tables, which distinguish by mode of transport. In our case, we concentrate on the water transport, which is the one that has been shocked the most, let's say, during that the 2021 the upsurge of cost, which I was mentioning. This global transport data set includes 135 importing countries and 235 exporting, and there's 25 million trade records. It's based on Comtrade Plus, and it's basically detailing the difference between FOB and CIF prices, basically. So that's the main point of this huge database, which was reference here is 2016. So we provided a map between the products that we are using in the magnet model. The magnet model is slightly more detailed than the GTAP, in particular on the agri-food sectors. So we have this mapping between the magnet and HS6 products, and then we can sort of aggregate the database following this mapping between commodities and between countries which are included in our model, in order to sort of approximate this UNCTAD database to the magnet database of which have been using. And here we can see some of the initial, very basic findings we had just by using this database and aggregating the data following the magnet country and product aggregation. Probably won't be able really to read the details of the products on the country, but on the left hand side we have the magnet products, and on the right is the countries, and this is the transport cost as a share of FOB price of 4 prices. So on the left hand side, as I said, we can look, I would say, a very basics, probably somehow, in particular from transport economist relationship, where we see that the value to volume ratio and the transport costs are basically inverted. They have an inverted relationship. So for all the products where you see a percentage change, the highest percentage change compared to the FOB price are high, where we have a low value to weight or to volume products. So those commodities are basically transported in bulk. For example, the crude oil is the third here. The fertilizer is the second. Or in other case, let's see if I can, the meat sector, for example. Here we have the pork, because of the special condition for being transported. And on this side, we just interrelate somehow this relationship with the country, and we see that for example, we have another quite clear relationship where we have, for example, here I highlighted the case of China. We see that while China is typically importing raw materials, which again are usually transported in bulk, while it exports manufactured goods, which in general are mostly transported in containers. And so we can see that the share of the imports, the share of the cost as a percentage of the FOB are much higher for imports than for export, because of this relationship, low value to volume ratio. And for example, the case of Australia, if you just want to have a look, is exactly the opposite. That is, exporting more raw materials and importing more manufactured goods. This is on top of that transport cost. As I said, we're also using a distance metrics, which I will not show in particular here. And the third database we have been using is this change in the container index. So here, basically, from this Freightos Baltic Index, what we have done, we have extracted data for 13 different regional combinations. we have looked at the difference during the 2021. So you can see the cost in dollars on 1st of January 2021 and the 31st of December 2021. And here we can really see the impact now in terms of cost for these 13 routes. So we have a global container index that increased by 169% during the year, and we have a few other that increase even more. For example, the route that goes from China, East Asia to North America, which increased by about 200% during the year. So these are basically our exogenous shocks. So what we will use to calculate our exogenous shock in the magnet model. So now, how did we calculate the shock? So ideally, we try to increase somehow the realism of our shocks, just not by multiplying uniformly by the increase of the transportation cost, all the trade flows, or all the part of the trade flows that are included in GTAP. But what we did, we firstly decomposed the transport cost given by UNCTAD in two main parts. So one part that we sort of called the fixed part, which is basically what include the cost of transportation due to the port costs, like loading, discharging into the ports, and one part that we call the variable part, and this part is basically due to the distance, so to the actually the moving the goods from one port to the other. And then we did a simple regression by the commodities included in the magnet model to estimate these variable transport costs per each of these commodities. And we have the results in the paper. Of course, the results are quite significant and also with a rather high R-square. And then those were the shocks that were applied to the magnet model. So basically, we used the index that I showed you before, and that was the increase in the transport cost was used in that part of the transport cost, including the UNCTAD part, which what we call the variable part. Those gave us the percentage of shock that we then applied to the water transport sector margins, which were included in the GTAP or in the magnet database. And here in these two graphs, there is a quick overview of the type of shocks we have implemented. So you can see in the scatter, the transport x-axis, the transport cost as a share of the FOB prices, and in the y-axis, the shocks that we included in the magnet as a percentage of increase of the margin. If I start on the right, you see not much dispersion when we talk about wheat. There is not much dispersion in terms of share of percent of the FOB price, and there is not even much dispersion in terms of increasing cost, because, well, as I was saying before, it's the wheat is mainly transported through dry bulk, and these have a very much smaller increase compared to the container cost, around 40%. And here on the left-hand side, we look at the light manufacturing. Here we see a much bigger dispersion of these shocks, which is mainly due to the reason that we have a higher increase in the cost of transporting container. And this is also interrelated with the distance. For example, given that most of the imports of the light manufacturing are actually coming from China, we see that the yellow points here, which are Japan, and given the lower distance between Japan and China, we can see that here the impact, the shocks that we are imposing on the magnet sector are much lower than those, for example, we are imposing on the bilateral route between the US and China, or in general between the US and the import of light manufacturing. But most of them are coming from China. Here are the pink circles you can see up here, and then we have all the others. Well, here we have singled out the three main imports, the EU, Japan, and US, and then we have all the others. So here we can see a much wider standard deviation in a way of the shocks that we are going to impose in our model. this is the summary by commodities of the shocks. So you can see the average shocks by commodities, and the line is just the standard deviation calculated or along all these shocks per different routes, per bilateral routes. So you can see also which are the shocks that are mostly which are the commodities that will be mostly impacted. Well, apart from the wool sector, the dairy, the pig meat, the processed rice, the other food, for example, are on top, but also manufacturing and light manufacturing will be those that will be mostly impacted in terms of shocks. So in terms of modeling, well, I've said it before, we've been using this magnet model, which is a global multi-sector, multi-region dynamic CG model based on GTAP. We're using the GTAP version 10 with 45 sectors, 27 regions, and basically the standard GTAP model for international transport. This we have not touched the initial data that we had in the GTAP model. As I said, we have, well, as probably have seen, the magnets and a few more agri-food disaggregation. For example, we have beef and sheep, which are two different single out sectors, the same for pork and poultry, and a few other additional disaggregation. And here is just to summarize the methodology behind. So as I was saying, we have this additional data that we have processed to calculate this transport cost, which are then simulated in magnet as an increased transport cost. Usually, as I would say, usually the typical type of shocks, which is shocking the productivity, the bilateral productivity of the variable, which is summarizing the international margins in GTAP. Okay, so that's for the methodology. Just a quick overview of the results. On top, well, here I have the impacts on the global trade prices and merchandise export and imports. On top, you have the impact on the CIF prices. Well, not surprisingly, they are all increasing because they all go through an increased shocks of the trade and transportation margins, and they are all more or less following somehow the pattern that we imposed with external shock. I'll show you also in the next slide a scatter. And then on the bottoms as graph, we see the impact on the global volume of import and exports, and again, as expected, most of them are going down. In general, we have a reduction of the world trade by about 0.4% in volume and by about 2% in value. Of course, the prices are rising, so we have a minor decrease in terms of volume. But we have also a few interesting results. For example, those that I highlighted in the bottom graph, which are the meat sector, where, as I was saying, the pig meat was the pork is one of the highest in terms of shock, and it looks like in terms of global trade we have somehow sort of substitution where the pig meat are really hidden quite hard in terms of reduction of the global merchandising, while the other meats somehow substitute for the missing meat, pork, and in the case of poultry we see also a small increase in the total amount of trade and meat. And here again, that was the left-hand side graph is basically what I was saying you before, summarized in a scatter plot. We have on the x-axis the shocks that we exogenously impose on the market, and on the y-axis the impact on the global import. So you can see sort of downward trend lines where those sectors that were highly with the highest shock shows also highest negative impact in terms of global imports. And I'm also showing here how by region the index of the CIF price index, where you can clearly see that some of the countries that were probably well, I would say those that are mostly open to trade show the highest increase of the CIF index.
2 minutes.
Yeah, sure. This was the rapid look at the EU. We just plot again the shocks towards the exports of the pork and the imports of vegetable oils, and more or less we have a expected downward trend results, which is much more visible for pork than for vegetable oils, where we have some countries. Well, the size of the ball is the original is the size of the trade, and we can see that some small countries here are even increasing their trade, their exports toward the EU, substituting, for example, the case of Brazil or Indonesia, which is somehow going down. In terms of macroeconomic results, yeah, quickly I wanted just to show that, well, GDP are generally decreasing and mostly driven by the terms of trade changes. The green spot here, in most cases, the terms of trade is deteriorating, and mainly because what we pay for our tradables, the increase of what we pay is much higher than what we get back for our tradables that we sell. So we have a deterioration of terms of trade and also of the GDP. And here is the impact of I wouldn't say of the inflation, but on the prices. Again, pretty much depending on the openness to trade, we have, or on the way in which this country trades, we have a different impact on prices. Of course, if you tend to be a net exporter, you will decrease your exports, and probably your domestic price will go down. For example, the case of Argentina, Brazil, here we have cereals, or primary agriculture and food, and so your overall price index might decrease, and the case of Europe, for example, or UK, which tend to be much more net importers, would be the other way around. We have also done sort of for fun kind of sensitivity analysis where we run and uniform shocks like of 35% on all the bilateral trade instead of the complicated shocks that we have run, just to see how much we were adding in terms of knowledge by all the effort that we have put in calculated in realism the shock, and indeed we can see somehow that, while the pattern despite being quite similar, we can see still that the effort was not totally useless, and we think we are definitely say something which is a little bit more realist than just expanding the trade with the uniform shocks, which more or less is the conclusion of the paper, which you saw that we show that the model is somehow sensitive to these variables. And also that the effort of trying to make it as realist as possible, it's also it's worthy to try to produce realism in the results, and we also see somehow that some interesting result in the second order effect of the shocks, where we can see some substitution at work, and also that commodities that might not be directly affected by the increasing cost, but will anyway be somehow affected more than we might be expect if we just look at the shocks that we implement. Of course, we need to dig a little bit more also in the results to be able to provide a much more detailed analysis of the overall set of results that the model can produce. Thank you so much for your attention, and I'm happy to answer in case there are any questions.
Thank you very much, Emanuele. Very interesting presentation. I like just the way you model, you derive those transportation costs. So maybe I may start with one question. Probably I will start with the kind of external validity of your results, because in the case of Japan, for example, as you mentioned, it's also a net importer. So it's probably one of the first time in recent years that there is an inflation in Japan here. So that really match the results. And I think it's about 1%, 1 to 2%. So it's very within your estimate. So I think this is a very interesting study, and I really appreciate that. I've seen, I think that was slide 8. There is a big standard deviation for I think that was vegetables or something, but the mean is very much low, while the standard deviation is very high. I just wanted to confirm the data. I think it's fruits and vegetables. The standard deviation is on the left.
Yeah, this one.
Yes, I just wanted to know if you can tell us a little bit about that.
No, I no, I think this is just what we have from this database. I guess most of it is also due by the fact that fruits and veg it's a big aggregate, which includes really a little bit of everything. You know, it goes from you know, maybe you might have tropical fruits which are really traded, which I guess the increase there was much higher, and then you have also maybe some other bilateral flows where you have more product which are traded more on a dry bulk, because you have also nuts, for example, there. So I guess, but this we'll have to dig deeper in that specific result. I guess that is the main answer. It's due to the aggregation bias of that huge somehow sector, which is fruits and veg, and which includes really things that might not be traded all with the same type of transport mode, if you want. That would be my answer to your question about that.
Okay, thank you very much. Can we welcome other questions?
Also take into account when you mention the inflation, well, you know very well now that is these models, of course, they are real models, so we see somehow the impact on prices, but we can definitely not say this is the impact of inflation. I mean, we don't. These are all real, real prices based on relative prices. So this is the small, if you want, contribution to the increase of inflation you might see in any country due to this specific shock. But definitely you cannot check against the current inflation you might see in your country.
Okay, no other question. All right, maybe Emanuele, any last word or?
No, well, thank you. No, really, thank you. Well, I guess most of the names I see are colleagues or former colleagues, so I guess they don't want to.
All right, so I think this wraps up our discussion, and I'd like to thank all the presenters, and also the participants for sharing the very interesting work, and I'm very grateful to have this opportunity to learn from your work. So I wish you enjoy the remaining of this conference. So thank you very much.